Marine Corps leadership principle number 4, keep your Marines informed. This is the fourth out of the 11 Marine Corps leadership principles. And obviously, we're going to substitute Marines with people or the people in your organization. If you want to picture how Marines keep each other informed, there is a formation or a group meeting at the beginning of the day, and you have the leader standing out front, and he's just telling people what's going on for the day. This is kind of typical. And then you have the same thing toward the end of the day, group formation, and then after that, everybody's usually cut loose for what they call liberty, or the workday's over. In that exact formation idea, that might not be possible, probably isn't possible for what you're trying to do, but the principle is the same possibly. And maybe it's not every day, twice a day, but the idea and the reason the Marine Corps does that is you tell everybody what needs to be done, and then they can move and get to work on what needs to be done. In the end of the day, you talk about what's coming up for the next day. So for context, whatever works for you, but the idea is that people are not on autopilot. They need to be told what's going on, why, the priorities, that kind of thing. And I'm going to get into a little bit of different aspects of keeping your people informed. Depending on what you read, over 85% of people in the workplace cite poor communications as the root cause of the problems that they experience on a daily basis. And communication is more than telling people what needs to be done or even what the priorities are. Communication is clear roles and responsibilities. And this is something that I talk about a lot. But as a leader, manager, you need to repeatedly talk about what people's roles and responsibilities are, because organizations are typically in a constant state of change. And the way it was done last year, or maybe even last week, may not be the way that it's being done right now. So, clarifying roles and responsibilities, this is not something that you do once a year or just during your personnel evaluation times, maybe at the end of the year or midway through the year. This is something that you have to keep reiterating who's responsible for what and who they are to communicate what to, who's the next person in the value chain, who's the previous person in the value chain or previous department, what can they expect and what other people expect of them. Good quote from Jack Welch, president, CEO, I think he was the chairman of GE too. He says, the problems arise when people are cut off from the information they need. And we don't always think about it like that, or at least, I could say I haven't thought about that. But if you can keep people informed, give them the tools, and so to speak, on what they need to get their job done, then you need to do less supervision. You need to be less directive. You need to be less descriptive. You can be less descriptive. And but if you don't do that, if you cut them off from the information they need, then they're just going to be looking at you for every little thing, and that's might be what you want, but you're not going to get a lot done that way. So to wrap up that, if you think people understand what's going on, if you think they understand the roles and responsibilities and the information that other people need from them, if you think that's just intuitive, you're mistaken. It's not. You got to be very deliberate in how you communicate on what people need to do and how they need to work together. Purpose is key. People need to understand why they're doing things and how it fits into the larger accomplishment of the goal for the group. The way I like to explain this one or discuss with people is if people understand why things need to be done, then they can make their own decisions. They're not relying on you to tell them what needs to be done first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. As well, they can react to changing situations, which you're going to want. If you're in a high paced or a high tempo organization, maybe you don't think of it that way, but if you have competition, you are. But if you don't make it a point to tell people why things are important, if you're not transparent about that, then all you're doing as a manager is controlling movements and controlling tactical actions. And you're not gonna have a span of control, particularly if you have a large organization, but it really doesn't take that large of an organization to overload a leader. Next, how do you know if people know what's going on? And this is something that I learned in the Marine Corps, and I saw quite a bit throughout my years. Is what you want to do is a manager leader. You want to walk around and you want to ask people the discrete questions on what is going on, the things that you're interested in everybody knowing. So maybe it's a quality inspection that's coming up, or a upcoming town hall, or asking them things that were said in the town hall and what they think about it. Now, if these people work for you, that's just what you should be doing every day. But if you are managing managers or maybe you're a higher level leader, it's okay to make the rounds, talk to people, and then if you do that and you ask people if they understand something that's very discreet, I think that's the key is you got to ask them the pointed question. Did you hear about, in that case, I used the quality inspection, and they say no. Then what you do is you go back to the manager chain and you ask them why Joe and a couple of the other folks down in the quality department don't know that there's an inspection coming up. And you only have to do that a couple times with managers before they get the signal or they get the feeling that you're going to be checking on that, and they should improve the communication after that. But that's not really called a skip level meeting. That's another way. That's another term out there is where one level of leader has a meeting without the manager there with other people. I'm not really a fan of that. I guess there's a place for that. But what I'm talking about is just plain old going, making the rounds, being visible, and asking people if they know what's going on. And again, be very directive and pointed with those questions. Otherwise, you might get something like, "Do you know what's going on?" "Oh yeah, I feel real good about it." They just want you to go away. So be pointed and descriptive in what you're asking. Rumors. This is a killer with regard to good information flow, good communication. And the only way to address rumors, I think, is to tell the cold, hard truth. It's another way of saying being transparent. You want a reputation as the manager or the leader in the organization. You want a reputation for telling the cold, hard truth. Like I said, when people come to you and they ask a question and you give them an answer, if you don't know the answer, it's important to say you don't know the answer and maybe you need to find out for them. But they're going to be able to tell if you're BSing them. So you want to make it a goal to be transparent as you can. Another way to look at that, make look at it from the opposite direction, is that you minimize the amount of things that you don't tell people. So there are some confidential things in the workplace, pay and other HR related things, but beyond that, you want to really try to get down the amount of things that you're not telling people down to the absolute minimum because that's where the rumors grow from. And if you are not like that, if you're transparent, you're really, without realizing it, encouraging people to come up with rumors or explanations to what they see going on. Big manager meeting, with the door closed for 3 hours. You probably need to say something about what that was about, just generally, because people can assume the worst. And instead of good teamwork and good crosstalk communication multiplying your effectiveness, rumors, what they do is they divide up. And you may have seen this, but different departments will get different versions of the rumors that maybe suit the narrative that they're more familiar with. So not only do you have rumors, but you got different rumors, and those really can divide and reduce your effectiveness, reduce your unity of effort and what you're trying to achieve across the team. Celebrating wins. This is a good way to show people, and I like this term, what right looks like. Got to be a little bit careful with that, but I think people appreciate when the leader just describes what it looks like when we're doing our job as a team and then maybe even as individuals correctly. What does right look like? But good way to do that is to recognize people in front of the team, from the front of their peers, and that's a way. So if you do that, you kind of showing them that you approve of whatever was being done, and typically you want to reward like that when people exceed standards. So you don't want to just be giving out ninth place trophies and saying thanks for every little thing and great job on every little thing. It depends on the situation. Now, if you have a lot of change going on, you might do that. You might recognize people for doing some very basic things, but they're doing them in the way that you want the organization to change too. So in that case, yeah, you may want to recognize some very basic things, but otherwise, think about where you can, if you're going to congratulate somebody or if you're going to say good job, if you're going to send an email, or first of all, you have to say something if people exceed the standard. But if you're just going to do that one on one, think about if you can parlay that into a larger communications effort to the team or to their peers, or because what you're doing there is that's part of your communication on what you want to see happen in the team. Organizational changes. This is another killer as far as communication goes. Then what I'm talking about here is maybe like a reorganization or it could be a reduction in the force or a riff where you're laying people off in the company, in the business. People are going to come up with their own reasons for why that's going on. That's kind of the rumor topic that I was talking about. But the other aspect of that is if there's organizational changes with regard to how people communicate with each other and different roles of responsibility, which is usually why you're doing the change in the first place, people are not going to understand it at the outset. So even if you have the greatest town hall ever, and even if you record it and make the video available, it's probably not going to be sufficient to communicate exactly what you're expecting from the team from here on out. These changes, you think about it this way, you may have been involved in that change. Like, you may have been involved in the meetings that said, hey, we need to consolidate these two departments, or we need a separate department. We need to change the way the work flows in this way. And those are not usually quick meetings, quick sessions. These are like you got the dry erase board or the smart board going. You got butcher block paper up there. And think about how long it takes you and the team to put that change together, to decide on what the optimal organizational change is. So to think that if you tell the group who was not in any of those meetings one time about the change, I think it's pretty obvious that you have to repeat. You have to talk about why the change came about, but it needs to be repeated. I mean, you don't want to assume that an organizational change is understood immediately because more times than not, if not every time, it's not. It's got to be repeated. Leading by example, leading from the front, setting the example. One of my favorite authors these days, Robert Greene, has a quote where in one of his videos where he says, "Everything's an example." And sometimes we think about setting the example, maybe with regard to the things that I've just said, is you want to show people what right looks like. You want to model that behavior. But, if you think about it, you really don't have to try too hard to set the example because you're always setting the example, everything you do. But we can tend to think of it in terms of just the positives only. So, as far as keeping people informed, but maybe one of your informal communication techniques is by leading by example. Just remember, everything you do is an example, and whether or not you're making a concerted effort to do so, people are watching. The leader's always being watched. And little things like coming in 10 minutes late or letting your dress code or your business attire decrease a little bit. People are picking up on that. And, you are communicating with people, but just by the way you act. And you have to be around people to communicate and keep them informed because what you need to do is you have to see in their eyes, in their faces, in their body language, whether or not they understand what's going on. In a hybrid environment, it's a little more challenging. Obviously, you're not physically there with somebody, or if you're totally remote, you got to have cameras on. You got to try to mitigate it somehow. If for whatever reason you can't bring people to put their cameras on, then you have to have a more frequent one-on-one communication with people. You got to have. It can't be. The worst would be just to chat people or email only. You're not going to get a sense for whether or not people understand what's going on, and thus whether or not you're doing a good job of keeping them informed. So that's it. Marine Corps leadership principle number 4: keep your Marines informed, keep your people informed. Remember, 85% of people agree that the root cause of the problems they experience in the workplace are communication related. One of the main ways that you combat that is by keeping people informed of what's going on, giving them the purpose, the why, a larger context for what you're doing and why it's important. Hope this helps. If I can help you out at all, my information's in the profile. Thanks.